salary differential between the top ranked CEOs that are working in Pakistan and the average worker.
Even the 37,000 rupees, a lot of people don't get paid that.
Welcome to our podcast. I'm Amir Qureshi and meet my friend
Shehryar.
So let's have a chat about a number of things today, but one of the things I wanted to pick on was this big salary differential between the top ranked CEOs that are working in Pakistan and the average worker who is barely making minimum wage of 37,000 rupees per month. What are your thoughts on that? Why such a disparity between salaries in Pakistan's corporate sector?
Well, I was hoping to start with, information about your trip to Bangkok, but anyway, that's...
Well, actually, that's a good idea. You talked about Bangkok.
Yeah, Bangkok. You're pretty silent on that, so, perhaps...
Well, there is a famous saying, what happens in Bangkok stays in Bangkok. And my trips to Bangkok actually only have three things. Firstly, there is the daily massage. Secondly, there is the daily Muay Thai practice, which is one of my new passions. And the third thing I would rather not talk about because my wife may be actually watching this podcast as well. So three things are a must every day in Bangkok.
But your wife goes with you, so I mean...
Yes, but then, she doesn't know everything that I do or where I go.
But just, back to your question, I think that these sort of discrepancies, while they exist in a lot of countries around the world, particularly I think the US is an extreme example of income discrepancies at the most senior. But in Pakistan's context, that because the lower levels are literally mired in poverty, even working for these, profitable financial institutions, I think that it becomes more of an issue here. Also, even though a lot of this information is technically publicly available in their annual reports, most people don't know.
Yes.
The average person, even working in the banks or in the corporate sector, will not know, that the average sort of bank CEO can earn between 300 and 400 million rupees a year. Which is over $1 million a year, whereas sort of median salaries would be, in the few $100s a month.
Yes. I suppose in the defense of these highly paid bank executives, not that I would like to defend them or their salaries, but $1 million compared to what I suppose bank CEOs earn in countries like the United States or United Kingdom is probably not a lot of money. But you're quite right. In the Pakistani context, someone earning $1 million plus a year is a lot of money, especially when the minimum wage is around about 37,000 rupees. That is the disparity that I think we would like to focus on. Why such a big difference?
Well, and even the 37,000 rupees, a lot of people don't get paid that. The unfortunate thing is that, especially in the unregulated sectors, listed companies, I think they can't really get away with not paying minimum wage. But most of the, small to medium companies in Pakistan, where the majority of people work, are not listed. And they're not subject to SECP rules and regulations. So, they don't even pay their employees. I mean, I was reading somewhere that over 90% of the people in the unregulated sector don't get minimum wage.
That's actually unforgivable, I think.
And I think it just speaks more to us as a society rather than, any kind of, business practices, that because there is so much poverty and because for every person there are like 10 ready to replace him, at that salary. Unfortunately, employers take advantage of this.
Yeah, and I think, as an employer, everyone wants their employees to be motivated, conscientious, make sure they never take a day's sick leave, etc. But when you look at either the very lower level of staff or even the mid-level professionals, you'll find that the salaries are probably not enough for people to get by. Let's do a quick analysis. I know you're not an accounting person, but I'm sure you can handle this.
Yeah.
Someone earning, say, 200,000 rupees gross from some organization, how do you think he or she can survive in this economy?
extremely difficult, I think, particularly when you're talking 200,000 gross. That means, he's probably taking home, anything from 150, 160, because the rest goes in taxes. If he has children in school, that takes away a big chunk, and that those generally need to be paid quarterly. So as a result, it's not just the expense, but it's a cash flow hit as well. That you need to have 2 or 3 kids, fee paid every quarter. So it is very difficult, and as a result of which, I think, and I don't have data to back this up, but as a result of which people resort to other kinds of things, whether they have a side hustle or they're dipping their hands into some, till, could be anything, but just to get by and make sure that they can provide a reasonably decent living for them and their families.
So I think the key point is, whenever we talk about employee motivation, we assume that their basic needs are being met. Now, we've just established that someone earning 200,000 rupees, which is a reasonably good salary for Pakistan, 200,000 rupees after tax is taken into account, after he or she has to pay for the school fees, then the travel between home and work, then by the time you add groceries and everything else, would barely be surviving. Assuming that they don't have access to a family home where they live, they probably wouldn't be able to afford rent. So that kind of person is not going to be fully motivated when it comes to work. And like you're saying, he's going to be looking, or she's going to be looking for a side hustle, a way to make money elsewhere, or the next job that comes along which pays them a little bit more. Yeah. And I think this is an issue for the companies to address. Because all of these companies that we're talking about, whether they're financial institutions or FMCGs, they're all quite profitable. They can afford to pay people $1 million salary. They could surely look after the next layer of staff a little bit more.
Yeah, and we can talk about this later as well, that it comes down to how you're approaching business and how you think that motivated employees, how much more they can add to your organization. Or whether you just assume that just because he has a job and has enough money to kind of feed his kids barely, that's okay, because there are 1 million more lined up behind him to get his job if not. The other thing, of course, is that with a population structured the way ours is, and half the population or whatever the current number is, lives in rural areas, who are kind of out of this whole counting as far as minimum wage or anything is concerned, because they're subsistence level lives that they lead. But increasingly, especially with the sort of few years of inflation we've had in the last 2 or 3 years in Pakistan, I think even those minimum wage, the ones who are getting minimum wage are now, behind the 8 ball, as it were, in terms of the purchasing power of the money they were getting.
Yes, the inflation rate in Pakistan has been quite high, as we all know. We've had a couple of years where inflation was very high. So the minimum wage, even though it's moved from about 16,000, 17,000 to now 37,000, is still very, very basic, and people can barely manage to survive. And I think some of the companies have spoken about the concept of a living wage, which probably needs to be around at about minimum of 50,000, and that is still very close to, I suppose, the breadline. But below that, it's very difficult for anyone to survive in this country or this economy.
It depends on what the company's priorities are. Because if it's a profitable company, they can, at the end of that day, say that we're going to make a little less profit by paying our people a little more. Pay them more than you think that you should be paying them.
Yes,
and that's quite a novel concept in most places. But in more and more companies around the world, that concept is taking root, because for the last 60 or 70 years, the way the sort of corporate environment has been structured is that the most important thing is capital. And capital gets rewarded more than anybody else does.
Yep.
And capital gets priority over labor, or just breaking them down into basic economic units. So I think because of that, and because companies now operate, largely based on, how well they can raise capital and how well they can reward capital, people theoretically, especially in low productivity economies like Pakistan, people have become kind of like a second priority because there are so many of them with the same basic level of expertise and skill that you can access.
So that actually takes me to another direction, I suppose. Firstly, the companies should be more concerned. If you're talking about them being good corporate citizens, they need to worry about their employees much more, make sure they have enough money so they can survive from month to month. The second thing is, let's put the companies aside for a minute, because I think we've done enough company bashing. Let's put the company aside. Let's talk about the employees. If you're one of those people earning that level of income, how can you firstly ask for a pay increase, and how can you increase your capacity to earn income or to generate income for your family? What are things that people should be thinking about?
I think that one of the main responsibilities as a professional one would have is to upskill yourself. And I think that depending purely on the organization to provide that upskilling and that training and capacity development would be, that's not something that you should bank on. Some may do it, most will not. So you have to upskill yourself. And as you know, a lot of universities now, I mean, the Harvards and MITs and Stanfords, they offer a lot of online free courses that you can take. There's Coursera, that's something that people can. So it's incumbent upon them, with all of the training available on YouTube and all of these platforms. If you don't do it, I think that you're not taking advantage of all of the options available. So what's your take?
Yes, I think ultimately, there is such a thing as intrinsic motivation, which has to come from within yourself, and it's up to all of us to improve. Now, if there is no other reason, just for the economic advantage that we can gain, and in a competitive marketplace, the more qualified you are, the better you are at your job, the more exposure you had, the chances of getting a salary increase are that much greater. And you really don't have a choice. It's survival of the fittest really out there in the corporate sector. So you have to do that, the upskilling. The other thing that really helps, and has helped me in my own career, is networking, getting to know people, learning from others, finding people who can guide you, coach you, mentor you at different stages of your career. Now, Pakistan has a lot of people who are willing to give free advice, but you don't have to accept it from everyone. You have to be a bit more selective about who you listen to, who you take into confidence and discuss your problems. But finding a good seasoned professional who's been through this before, that really is a helpful thing, I think.
I agree. I think that it is, everybody has to take responsibility for their own careers and their lives. Beyond what the company may or may not do for them. I think that an attitude of continuous learning is something that we should all be, regardless of whether you're a young professional or you're older in your career or more mature or at a senior level or the CEO somewhere. If you're not thinking about constantly improving yourself and improving your skill set and improving how you manage people, or improving whatever technical capabilities you have which your job requires. In an increasingly knowledge-based society and economy, you can't survive. You won't be able to grow.
Let's talk about a situation where I find myself in a job, and we've already talked about the economic necessities and difficulties. How do I go about asking my boss for a pay increase? Have you had to do something like this in your career? Have you had asking for a pay increase?
Unfortunately, many times. Because regardless of the nature of the organization you work for, whether it's a multinational or whether it's a local one, a lot of these dynamics are pretty much the same. Where you're saying that the work that you're doing is, not being recognized the way it should, and therefore you need to be able to sit down with your supervisor and say, well, here's what my responsibilities are, here's what I'm actually delivering. So I think that, in view of this, I need a better compensation package. Now, one of the things, and it might be a little bit of a digression, but I think one of the things that's very important now, since COVID, this whole work from home and all of this has become quite prevalent, even though the pendulum is starting to swing back now, particularly in the US and many other developed economies as well, where people are coming back to office. The unfortunate thing is that proximity to
Yes.
your supervisors, to your peers, is going to determine how successful you are. And your compensation and how well you're regarded. So if you're out of sight, theoretically you're out of mind.
Yes.
So I think that that's something, especially younger employees who've gotten used to this kind of work from home environment and working in their pajamas or whatever it is. They may be quite productive, sure, but will it help them grow in their careers? Not as much as if they're in the office.
Yes, and I think I was reading about this the other day, an article which says that there is lots of ways of remaining visible even when you're working remotely. And a lot of it has to do with regular check-ins with your supervisor, with your boss, highlighting or showcasing some of the work that you've done, speaking up in the team meetings that you have, whether they're via Zoom or Teams or whatever, just making sure that people know that you exist. Because it's often, as you've said, out of sight, out of mind. So you need to be much more proactive in promoting yourself when you're working remotely versus when you're in the office and you keep bumping into the boss. And I think research has also shown that proximity to the board of directors or the C-suite also helps in terms of your salary negotiation. That's why the CEOs are paid a lot more than the next level Cs. Because CFO, for example, is paid significantly less, even though I think the role is probably just as important, if not more important at times than the CEO.
Right.
What about, so let's say the salary is not keeping up and you're struggling. What is one big option that many Pakistani young people seem to be taking these days?
Well, I think, everybody is sort of branching out into their own business now, especially in the digital world. Because it's in some ways very easy, let's not say easy, it's much cheaper than it used to be to start a business. You can literally start it with almost no capital. Whether it's selling something online or selling your services online or whatever it might be, You can set up a website in $20, your own website,
Yes.
and you can enable it for e-commerce and start doing that. So a lot of young, I've interacted at various sessions in universities with graduating classes. And a lot of them are not looking for 9 to 5s because they've been exposed to this world where everything seems possible sitting at home or on your laptop and building a business that way. So I think many of them are starting to think that way and saying, I might get a few years work experience somewhere, but my eventual goal is to start your own business. And so I have a question for you regarding just going back quickly to this work from home thing, because that kind of allows younger people particularly to do the office work as well as do other work, which is not that easy in office.
Yes.
So what do you think of the whole work from home as it is, and should it be there? Should everybody just go back to the office and continue as it was for the last 80 years?
So this is I suppose, hotly debated topic at the moment, especially in the Western countries. There is a lot of pressure for people to go back to the office. And I don't have fixed views about it. I think a lot depends on the role that you're in. A role that requires interaction with other people, you need to be in the office. But if on the other hand you work alone, you're writing reports or doing accounting and bookkeeping where you don't have day-to-day interaction with other people, then working from home is fine. And I also think people should have flexibility. It shouldn't be either or, it could be a combination. The hybrid model works very well. I remember working from home when I was in my 20s. I was working on a project in Australia for KPMG, and my supervisor at the time said, "You're too busy in the office, you have too many people interrupting you, you're not able to be so productive, why don't you go and work from home?" And at that time, we did not have any of the technology that we currently have, but I was sent home, and I was sitting in the dining room from about 8:30 to 5 every day, writing the report that I was supposed to, and by the end of the week I had finished. I didn't have the interruption, nobody could call me on my mobile phones were not invented, I'm actually that old, and it worked. So I think for certain roles it's very effective, very productive. We're working with lots of people on a day-to-day basis that are based at home. So we have an editor doing some work for us, no need to have face-to-face interaction, all the work is done remotely. But I think you need a combination, where working in the office is much better in terms of building a culture, a cohesive team, it works much more effectively. But there is a place for work from home, I believe.
And I think the unfortunate thing is, as I'm reading about this, particularly in the US, where a lot of these return to office mandates are becoming quite harsh, is that many organizations are using them as a way to weed people out.
Yes.
So if somebody is, as a result of the work from home policy, moved an hour or two away from office, to a cheaper place or whatever it might be, and now they have to come back to work or whatever the nearest office is, the message that they're getting. I mean, just as an example, Amazon, my daughter works for Amazon, and initially when they started the back to office, it was 3 days a week, and you could kind of choose sort of, which 3 days a week. But as of last week, it's 5 days. And for people who are an hour or 2 hours away, they either move close to an office or they move out. I mean, they're not really offering them a third option now. So it's quite tough, and especially in a market where right now the upper hand is with the companies, and there are more people looking for jobs than jobs available.
Another option that the younger generation is taking up, apart from looking for gigs on the side or doing internet-based work, is leaving Pakistan altogether. The last year or so, we've had a lot of people shifting to places like the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Canada, Australia, wherever they could go. And of course, one can't blame them, because the salaries on offer, for example, in the UAE, are US dollar linked. There is no income tax at all, and good luck to anyone who can find a job, because while they may leave Pakistan, I think they can still continue to contribute and positively to Pakistan once they go. What are your thoughts on this so-called brain drain that Pakistan's having?
I think we should triple or quadruple it, because I think,
What about the companies here? What are they going to do if everyone leaves?
Well, it's going to be practically impossible for everyone to actually go, and not everyone will want to go. I mean, people have family commitments, and they can't move or whatever. But a significant portion of people, in Pakistan's case, pretty much all men. So that it's kind of split into two. One is you have the people going for the lower end kind of labor type, or labor plus type jobs. The other is obviously the more educated people, with master's degrees or doctorates or doctors or engineers or whatever it might be. So the benefit there is, they go there, they earn more money, they send more money back, so there's the remittance part of it improves. B, they improve their skill set in a much more competitive and dynamic work environment than would be afforded them here. And they become better professionals. And a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them eventually start to want to come back and work here or contribute here in other ways as well, not necessarily just as working, because a lot of times people move back for family reasons, parents are old and stuff like that. So they come back with big skill sets. And generally, financial success, which then can help the local economy. So I think we should be pushing hard for this, both at the lower end, but specifically at the higher end. And I think there are enough people in Pakistan, given the population rates, that you'll always have a pipeline of reasonably talented people, available as they come through. So if these people leave, there are more jobs for the fresh graduates and the younger people coming through.
Yes. So it's definitely an opportunity, and I think people and those out of Pakistan generally do very well. I mean, when you look at countries like the UAE, some very experienced people are still working in Dubai, for example, very senior jobs as bankers, financial consultants, and so on. So there is great potential, and I think if you can secure a job in those countries, you can still maintain your connection with Pakistan given the proximity. I think we're getting almost to the end of this episode. If people have any questions, if they'd like to get in touch, we would encourage them to get in touch, send us a message, comment on this podcast, reach out to us on LinkedIn. We'll be very happy to take questions and answer them, because ultimately that's why we're here, to help people. What are your thoughts on this episode, and how would you like to wrap things up?
It's obviously we would love to hear from people, and at some point we will take individual questions as well and try and answer those in subsequent podcasts as we get them, and not just as replies to comments on the podcast. I think that many of the things that we would like to discuss, or we have discussed today, and we will discuss in other podcasts as well, are those that are close to people's hearts, especially people working in the corporate sector and the companies themselves, because it's not just for the employees. People who run these businesses or own these businesses can also benefit from a lot of the discussions. And as we start to go deeper into this and we start to talk to a lot of the CEOs, we have several CEOs also lined up, as you know, who want to come on and have a chat. And as we've discussed, this is not going to be we won't be lobbing any sort of gentle questions at them. So these will be a tough discussion. And I'm looking forward to talking to many of them. But it's a great chat, and as we expand on these, let's see how the rest of the discussions go.
Thank you, Shehryar. I think it's been a pleasure having this conversation with you. I hope the viewers can take some of the key messages that we've talked about. Firstly, the corporate sector, the companies have an obligation to think about their employees, not just the CEOs who earn millions of dollars, about how they survive. And ultimately, as far as the employees are concerned, we've also talked about the fact that they need to work on themselves, improve their skill set, gain more knowledge, get more experience, network. And if all else fails, there's always Dubai or Saudi Arabia. Thank you for joining us, Shehryar. We'll meet up soon. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.